In 2022, doctors were recording a patient's brain activity. He was 87 years old and he'd been having seizures, so they hooked him up to an EEG. Then his heart stopped, right there during the recording. Nobody planned for that, but the machine kept running. It captured 30 seconds before his heart stopped and 30 seconds after. What showed up on that readout is still being debated by scientists today. Most of us picture dying like a light switch. 1 second you're conscious, next second, nothing, off. That's not really how it works, at least not in the rare cases where scientists have measured a dying brain in real time. The brain doesn't shut off all at once. It happens in stages, and some of those stages are stranger than you'd expect. Take hearing, for example. It seems to be one of the last senses to go. Older research backs this up. Some patients who were clinically unresponsive still showed brainwave activity when family members spoke near them. That's part of why hospice workers tell families to keep talking, even at the very end, long after a person stops responding. It's a strange thing to imagine. Someone lying there, unable to move or speak, but still somewhere in there, still hearing a familiar voice in the room. The 2022 case goes further than that, though. Researchers led by Dr. Raul Vicente looked closely at those final 30 seconds. Right before the heart stopped, they saw a surge of gamma wave activity. Gamma waves are your brain's fastest waves. They show up during focused thinking, memory recall, dreaming. Basically, the moments when your brain is working hardest. In this man's dying brain, gamma activity spiked, specifically in areas tied to memory. For a few seconds as his heart was failing, his brain lit up in a pattern that looked like active memory recall. That lines up with something people have described for centuries. Your life flashing before your eyes. Turns out that might not just be a metaphor. It might be a real, physical event happening inside a real, dying brain. One study, one patient, that's not proof of anything universal, and researchers are clear about that. We don't know if this happens to everyone. We don't know what it felt like for him, or if it felt like anything at all. It's entirely possible this was unique to his brain, his condition, the specific way his body was shutting down. It's not the only piece of evidence like this, though. Back in 2013, a University of Michigan team led by neuroscientist Jimo Borjigin studied dying rats. After cardiac arrest, something happened. A massive, coordinated burst of brain activity. Again, gamma waves. Again, patterns linked to conscious perception. Borjigin's team argued this challenges the old idea that the brain just goes dark and stays dark. Instead, there's a brief, intense surge, almost like the brain throwing everything it has left into one final push before the lights go out. It's worth pointing out that a rat's brain isn't a human's brain, and researchers are careful not to overstate the comparison. But the pattern showing up in two very different species using two very different methods is hard to just dismiss as coincidence. Nobody fully agrees on why this surge happens. One theory says it's a panic response, the brain trying to restore oxygen flow, and that misfires into something that looks like heightened awareness. Another theory says that as different brain systems shut down, they stop suppressing each other, so quiet regions suddenly light up all at once, right before going silent for good. There's a third possibility too, one some researchers have floated almost as a side note, that this surge isn't really for anything at all, that it's simply what a complex system does when it loses power unevenly, the biological equivalent of a building's lights flickering before a blackout, rather than some deliberate final performance from the brain. Neither of the first two explanations is exactly comforting, and the third one isn't much better. But maybe this isn't about comfort. It's about what the data actually shows, whether or not we like where it leads. There's a connection worth mentioning here too. Near-death experiences. The floating feeling, the tunnel of light, the overwhelming calm. For years, people treated these as spiritual events, or hallucinations nobody could explain. Some researchers now think a gamma surge, combined with certain brain chemicals flooding the system as oxygen drops, could physically produce exactly these experiences. Not proof of an afterlife. Not proof against one either. Just a possible explanation for something that's been described the same way by unrelated people across very different cultures for a very long time. That consistency is what gets me, honestly. If this was random hallucination, you'd expect wildly different stories from different people. Instead, the same handful of themes show up over and over: a light, a sense of peace, a feeling of reviewing your life. Something is producing that pattern, and it increasingly looks like it's happening inside the dying brain itself, not somewhere outside of it. Put it all together, and you get a rough timeline. In the minutes before clinical death, oxygen to the brain drops. Complex thinking goes first, along with spatial awareness, the stuff that takes the most energy to run. As oxygen keeps falling, that gamma surge may happen, tied to memory and awareness, lasting anywhere from a few seconds to about 30. Hearing fades last, based on older research, holding on longer than almost anything else. Then brain activity drops off sharply. Though even after that, some studies have recorded scattered bursts of electrical activity for minutes afterward. Not consciousness, probably. More like the brain's systems slowly, unevenly powering down room by room long after anyone's actually home. 7 minutes is a rough estimate for this whole window. It varies a lot, depending on the person, the cause of death, and how fast oxygen gets cut off. For some people, it might be shorter. For others, longer. Nobody has a precise number that applies to everyone. What strikes me most isn't really the science. It's what this might mean for how we think about dying. For a long time, we assumed consciousness just switches off. That whatever comes after your heart stops is nothing, an absence, a void with no experience attached to it. This research suggests something more complicated, that the last moments might not be silent, that there might be one final intense burst of the brain doing what it's always done, making sense of things, pulling up memories, staying aware just a little longer than we thought possible. Nobody knows what that burst actually feels like from the inside. Maybe it feels like nothing. Maybe it feels like everything at once. We genuinely don't know, and anyone who tells you with total certainty either way is guessing. But if that 87-year-old man's brain really was replaying pieces of his life in those last seconds, there's something fitting about that. Not an ending that just cuts to black. One last quiet moment of the brain doing what it spent an entire lifetime learning how to do.